Hello and welcome to Analysing Avatar. Today we're sitting down to review the episode Skeletons in the Closet? I assume skeletons, plural. Many skeletons held in a closet is what the episode was called, I think.
Yeah, the episode is called Multiple Elephants Dicking About in a Closet.
It's the episode where we find out the truth about sort of Tarlok and his brother and his dad, but also there's some other stuff that happens at the front. I was just saying to Chris before we started recording, I don't know how much I have to say on this episode because this is very much a set-up piece of television. It exists to move the chess pieces around into the positions they need to be for the finale, and it doesn't really do a lot more other than some exposition and that. I don't really feel like any of the characters go through anything particularly it shifts them in this episode. I don't think there's even particularly anything that's that good action-wise. It's definitely got a tone. Like the war is happening tone. It all feels a bit miserable, which is I think designed. But other than that, I don't know. And obviously, the backstory for Yukon and Tarlok and Noatok, the brother. Noatok, who is Amon's real name. That's pretty sad. But I don't know. How do you feel about it, Chris? Because I came out of it feeling like almost nothing. I was really oh
I
no.
got two similar to you, where I was like watching it going, oh, this is another episode where it's like they put the pieces in place, cool. I do have two. I've got two discussion points, Dan. Let's go there. Let's go for the smaller discussion point first.
Sure.
Do you think they've concentrated so much, I think, on like Asami's reaction and a bit of Korra's? This sudden Marco, oh yeah, no, I am basically in love with you. Obviously, he's seen her kick ass and be selfless and stuff the last few episodes, which is what he specifically draws upon. But did you not think that was a bit like, I don't know, just a bit sudden maybe? I guess it's been building, but I was just a bit like, oh, okay. Like, I think it's because it's such like an emotive speech. And I was just a bit like, oh, okay, we're doing this now, are we? Okay, sweet, I guess.
Yeah, I could see somebody finding it that particular strength of it out of place. The reason that doesn't really stand out too much for me, I think, so simply put, is I feel like maybe the idea is that he's supposed to have felt like that the whole time, but been denying it. Maybe. It was very clear, even in the episode where Bolin kind of liked Korra, that Marco had some reasonably strong feelings for both girls. So it kind of makes sense that an experience where he nearly lost her, she was kidnapped, sort of helped him to realize which of the two his feelings were stronger for. Maybe, and look, maybe misguided teenager thinking. Maybe that's wrong, but I feel like they did enough to set up that he had legit feelings for her, and then following her being kidnapped and his reaction to her being kidnapped, I feel like they did, and it is very borderline, but I do think they did just enough to justify what happens in this episode, at least from the perspective of, if you look at it from the perspective of, at least this is what the character currently thinks he wants, because he's been flaky as old Mako. He's been back and forth. He's been an indecisive character all season. He's proper. I think I'm using this reference correctly. He's proper. He's doing an Archie. Is it Betty or Veronica? He doesn't know. But sometimes it's very much Betty. He's so sure it's Betty, and then the next week maybe he's really sure it's Veronica. I think I'm using that reference correctly. I only know a little bit about Archie, but it feels like a good comparison. So yeah, I see your concern, and I understand it, and I don't think you're wrong, because I do think there's a version of this where you watch it and you don't feel like they've done enough because it's so on the line, where you don't think they've done enough to justify the strength of his feelings for Korra in this episode. But again, if you're watching the last couple of episodes not through Asami's eyes, maybe that's the problem. Maybe every time Mako went to help Korra in the last couple episodes, we were really seeing Asami's perspective of it. It was always from Asami giving the side eye, Asami reacting to it.
I think that's a good observation on it.
That's lessened the behavior somehow, or maybe it's even partly been me reading all of that as well. Asami can't be too shitty about that because he's helping a friend that's just been kidnapped, and that's what we would all do. So I don't know. There's a few different ways, but I think they got away with it for me at least. But I definitely understand the feeling and totally think that's a valid perspective. I mean, how you. When you asked that question, was that from a place of I've not decided how I feel about it yet sort of situation, or was that you've decided you didn't particularly care for it, or?
Yeah, it was from a place of it felt a bit rushed and sudden, even though we spent so much time on the old LTB, love triangle bullshit. I still felt like the emotion of that scene in particular. I found myself thinking, I wish we'd have seen more from Marco's perspective. Maybe not so much in those words, because I think you framed it really nicely in your summary there, and that's put words to what I was feeling. But there was a definite sense of, well, like at one point, it looks like dude's leading in for a kiss. It's like you're in a relationship, mate. Men are the fucking worst. I'm discovering, Dan. Who knew?
I knew.
So. Yeah, oh man, really. Like,
I don't want to sound big-headed, Chris, but I knew.
I got a lot of mates that have been like female mates that have been going on a lot of like first dates and early dates with men the last couple of weeks, and honestly, we're the fucking worst.
I had a friend. Insane. I had a friend who went on a date, and then she said it was like 2 or 3 months later, he was like, yeah, that was a waste of my time, so can you now split the bill with me? You owe me, and this is months later, and he's like, you owe me like $24.35. Like he'd gone back and looked up how much he spent, and asked for it to be like split, which is just like, men are the worst. We are the worst.
Wow.
And if you're male and listening to this and thinking, come on, ask any female friend about their experiences dating. They will have 100 stories of the worst human beings you've ever heard, and to the point where you won't believe these people are real. That's the scary part.
And it means the bar is so insanely low. Do you know what I mean? Like, without sounding like Roy Kent in Ted Lasso, I very nearly said it at that clip afterwards. I had a friend last night talking about a guy, and she just used the word nice like 20 times. But genuinely, it was like, yeah, but every other guy I've been on a date with the last few months is a dick. So, I'll go on another date with the nice guy, and it's like, but he's not like...
I had this exact conversation with a friend over Christmas. So I had a friend who'd gone on like a couple of dates with this guy, and he was a bit of a douchebag. And she clearly just wasn't that fond of him. She's like, I guess if he texts me, maybe I'll see him again. I'm like, no, why would you do that to either of you? If that's how you're already feeling, and you're not even like in the full, that's never good. Save yourself that hassle. Red flags all over the place with this dude, and that's him at his early dating, like being his best. What's he going to be like when he gets more comfortable? No, this will be bad for everyone. Like I try, but it's people got to figure that stuff out themselves. So I wasn't too pushy, but like I made that point very clear, and then we left it there. Like I don't think she saw him again.
At one point, I said the sentence. I'm trying not to, give my opinion too much, and our other friend in the room went. I don't think you're particularly hiding how you feel about it.
No, but my friends, put it this way: my friends deserve better. That's all I'm saying.
That's which was exactly my point.
Pick up your game, dudes. Like listeners,
exactly.
That
was my whole thing.
Get better.
I was like, it's quite hard for me to be subjective here because I think you deserve so much more than nice. Anyway. And also, let's not forget, Dan, yeah, men don't even realise half the time they're being twats. So I'm sure we're not fucking sitting on a high horse here. I'm sure we've been twats as well in the past.
For sure, 100%.
And I'm sure to Jess and Nadia we are twats almost weekly.
I'm absolutely certain. But there is still a line, like, and I still feel like there's a lot of guys crossing a line that we're not crossing at the same time.
Yeah. I think that's fair. Anyway, and on that, Marco, sort your shit out. Don't be giving big romantic speeches to Korra when Asami's wonderful. Like, break it off with her before you're giving your big romantic speeches.
100%. But also, there's like a war happening, dude. Like, what's weird about the love triangle, love rhombus, love triangle bullshit, whatever we're calling it now? What's weird about that in the context of these couple of episodes that are happening now is they're a city under siege. They're literally at war.
But maybe that's the best time. Maybe that's whatever that Harry Potter quote is, Dan. Maybe that means it's exactly the right time.
Maybe, but
you know what it is? It's the kiss. Because actually everything he said could be interpreted as him just opening up about how he feels to a friend. I mean, it's not that, but in the mind of a young person, he's torn between two lovers, all that stuff. Fine.
Yeah,
it's the fact that it feels like they might kiss at the end that you go, oh no.
But I just think from a narrative perspective, from a tonal perspective of the episode, even if we're moving away from like Mako's choices and we're going, all right, teenage love triangle bullshit, fine, whatever. They're going to act weird, they're going to say things. I just think from an episode's from a tonal choice, this episode spends its first 5-10 minutes just depressing the shit out of you about their situation in the city. Amon has got a line of people he's stealing the bending from one by one. It's so dark and cloudy and grey, and the ships that are coming to save them get bombed out the water. It's just a really downer, showing the like negative sides of war start to the episode, right? Just tonally. And then we've got the second half of the episode, which is about an abusive parent, and it's tonally very, very down and rough. And then you've just got this thing in the middle, the Marco Korra exchange, which I do think progresses the love triangle bullshit in an interesting way, sure. But I just think it's in the wrong episode. I just think stick it at the start of the next one. Like, after they've been through all of this episode, Marco feels the need to say that. I don't know. In this episode, it just felt more than any other episode. It's felt a little bit like, while I think the motivations for all the characters make sense in that moment to why they got to where they got, as we already talked about with like whether it felt sudden or not with Marco. I just think in practice, when I look at this 22 minutes of television, tonally, it doesn't quite fit.
It's still, I agree it didn't fit tonally, but not for the sake, because it's at the beginning. It's before the big battle. It's before all of that stuff. I felt it almost came out of nowhere. Right? Are you
sure?
Top.
Are you sure it's not between? Is it not when?
No,
it's about the battle at the beginning. No, because wait a second, because they have the whole conversation with General Iroh first, and that's why they separate. That's why they're separate. The conversation they have is right before they invade Air Temple Island.
No, I'm talking about here's emotional. You're the best person I know. You're selfless, sitting by.
I'm talking about
Nappa.
the near kiss moment.
Yeah, that's like 3 minutes in. I'm sure.
I don't think it is.
Because my thing was like, this is like happening quickly. This is like right up top. They have the dinner, and then she's sat chilling there, and he goes and he's like, "Oh, I think you're the best." And then she's like, "I think you're pretty amazing too, but you already knew that." That one. And then it looks like they're going to kiss.
I'm talking about the moment where he leans in and nearly kisses her.
Ah, right. I'm talking about the chat at the beginning. But I mean, all we've said applies to both.
Yeah, it just feels out of place. I just feel like this is like maybe the episode not to do it.
Yeah, I'd agree. Especially when you've got them separated in the next episode.
Well, they're together though. Those two are together.
No, but separated from everyone else.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. They're still off on their individual missions. So like absolutely, I would agree with that.
Yeah, what I mean by that is you've got the built-in excuse for them to sort of have moments like that because they're on their own and they're being honest and they're going into battle and all that sort of shit.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, you're right. There's a more overt kiss later on. I forgot about that, which is where I think the confusion comes from. Because I think there's a subtle kind of stare at each other in that first scene as well. And then there's the more overt one later.
Yeah,
the
more overt scene, the one I'm kind of pointing out, I think is around 12 minutes-ish into the episode-ish, which is like halfway, almost exactly through. It's after they leave.
We were talking about two different scenes. My scene at the beginning is like 3 minutes in. So I think that's what's happened there.
Gotcha.
Moving away from the old love triangle rumbus bullshit, my bigger one is: do you think they spend enough time in the backstory? Like it's all really sympathetic to. I think the end of and then I did become everything he wanted to be me to become. I'm like, you're brushing over the bit where you go full on villain a bit. Like I appreciate the job of it is to make us feel sympathetic towards him and give us the backstory for Anon. But I'm watching that montage going, when are you going to justify and explain how he becomes the villain and resentful and hell-bent on revenge anyway? And I think it gets brushed off way too easily with and then I did become, obsessed, and that was a mistake, Korra. I'm truly sorry. Like, what? We're doing that in like 2-3 lines? All right. Like, I don't think they explain his turn enough. I don't think they explore that enough for me. I love the backstory, and I appreciate, obviously, tortured childhood is gonna fuck him up, but it just felt very much like that was the backstory of a character to feel sympathetic for, and almost like that was almost like a redemption backstory. But I don't feel we got enough backstory as to why. I don't know how the kid whose brother leaves him and whose father then dies. I don't know how that kid experiencing all of that. He said he in that montage, he was like, I never wanted to bloodbend again. Okay. Tell us what changed that. How come you started bloodbending again? Because you've been bloodbending, dude, and using it as a fucking weapon. Like, how'd you get from that to fighting Korra in the courtroom and, bloodbending her and kidnapping her and all of that stuff? How'd you go from that to that? And I'm sorry, I need more than, and then I became everything my father wanted me to become anyway. That's not an explanation for me. And it just feels like, whilst that montage succeeds in making us feel sympathetic towards Tarlok, it doesn't actually help me understand how he then ended up becoming the sort of villainous character that we've been seeing for the last few episodes.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like you've got point A and point C, and we never get point B. Like, point C being Tarlok earlier in this season, pushing for power, pushing for a political win because he wanted to rise in the city, through the ranks of the city. Knowing that capturing Ammon would make him popular in the press, right? Not knowing that Ammon was his own brother, but, we'll take that out of the equation because he didn't know that at the time. And that's what I like. I will say very much, just a very quick positive for the episode. I really like that that's what the route they go down, because I think there is a route where it's like, we were scheming together the whole time. But actually, I prefer it that he's just a corrupt politician trying to take advantage of a bad situation and earn some power off it. I think that's more interesting to me than my brother had plans, and I helped from inside the government make non-benders feel subjugated with curfews and stuff to help his cause. I much prefer he didn't know. But yeah, that's just me. But in terms of his route, yeah, you're right. So we got him earlier in this very season, striving for political power, the way his dad strived for power, resorting to bloodbending to do it, becoming his dad, sure. But when you show that backstory from this perspective, so right now, okay, so if point A is child him learning bloodbending bad, point B is modern day him. No, point B is the missing point that leads us to point C, which is modern day him becoming his dad. And then we have kind of point D, which is defeated him realizing that's a bad thing to have done. So we've got him at A and D feeling bad about bloodbending. But 2 weeks ago, he was at sea, quite happy to do it. So we really do need B to figure out how that roller coaster went up and down. I don't know if I've confused matters with that analogy, but that's kind of how I feel about it. There's a really nice symmetry between A and D, in that they're both moments in his life where he's realized how wrong bloodbending is, but we don't have the point that showed him getting back to that point. So it's a good thematic thing in this episode that we're seeing those two moments in his life, those 2 moments of regret. But we don't really know.
Yeah, because
what led him back. Was it just his natural ambition that took him there? Maybe he hadn't really used a lot of bloodbending at all since he was a kid, and he had mostly gone, up through the ranks via being a shady politician, being ambitious, and only had to resort to bloodbending when he got really desperate and got confronted by Korra later in the season. But then have that be part of the dialogue. Maybe have him explain that properly. Have him say, I did genuinely make a go of it without bloodbending. Years as a politician.
It's not even as simple as the bloodbending, though. Aren't there lines of dialogue when we
but
realise
the bloodbending represents that, though, in a lot of ways. But yeah, carry on, sorry.
No, for me, it doesn't represent why he specifically, is like, now I'm going to get revenge on you for my father and all of that sort of stuff. I hear what you're saying, and I agree.
Oh, yeah, you're right. You're talking about the speech from a couple episodes ago when he was all like...
Yeah, where he basically says, your Aang took my father's bending away, and I'm going to get revenge. Does that montage paint the story of someone that will want to get revenge for their father, who tortured them and made him do something he didn't want to do?
With a very quick line of dialogue, it could have, which is, I wasn't getting revenge for my father, I was getting revenge from my brother because you put him on the path.
Yeah, he doesn't know what
abusive.
path his brother led down, and maybe for the mother or something. I just think the problem is, the backstory is expositional, and the backstory is Korra, this is who Anon is. Now, she needs that backstory in that moment. So he is going, okay, you're going into battle with this person. This is the information you need. So it does make sense that that's the story he tells. But you kind of also have 2 characters that have been, literally doing battle and being at odds with each other. You kind of also want the backstory of, this is why I was coming after you, and I don't feel that backstory.
I don't think it needed to be told in 10 minutes of flashbacks either. I feel like a conversation, an exchange. You take out the excessive or tonally disparate love triangle bullshit from this episode, the stuff we already talked about, and replace it with 2 or 3 minutes more of Korra and Tarlok talking, and her saying, "Well, wait a minute, you did this a few weeks ago. You had me kidnapped, and you were behaving this way. Did you learn nothing from watching your dad?" And then have him sort of maybe not justify it, but sort of give his side of that a bit more clear, and use that as an opportunity to have him, sort of fill in that missing link in his story. That would help us understand those behaviors, because otherwise it's an inconsistent character, and it wouldn't be hard to add in point B, and by not including it, we're also going well, we could fansplain that. It could be this, or it could be that, or it could be that. And we could sit here all day and make a bunch of excuses, which I've done, which I have filled that in my head. That, maybe he wasn't doing bloodbending for the longest time. He was just an ambitious politician. And then after Korra came for him, his sort of old, his old annoyances came up. And then he realized that if Korra in her past life hadn't stopped her dad, then he wouldn't have abused, it wouldn't have, if he hadn't been so impotent in himself as a man without his bending, maybe he wouldn't have been so abusive to his children. So maybe all of Tarlok's suffering really stems from the Avatar taking his dad's bending and changing his dad's life. Maybe he could. That's all the stuff he could potentially feel that would explain all of this. But the point, I suppose, what it comes back to, very simply, is the episode doesn't do it. The episode doesn't go there. The episode hand waves it away, and you can say they were saving. They were making time. Trying to make sure they didn't go too much for the episode to actually contain. But realistically, there's some stuff in this episode that doesn't need to be here. That we talked about before we talked about this with the Mako stuff. So I do think it could have been handled better. I agree with your point. I think it's an incomplete character arc. It is the most charitable way to look at it. I think the less charitable way to look at it, if you were so inclined, is an inconsistent character in Tarlog. And I think you'd be right to see it either way. You could be charitable and sort of go, well, you can imagine whatever point B was, and you can, and that might be enough for some people, and I think for some people, for others, that won't be enough at all. And I think the show could have solved that problem pretty straightforwardly with and it doesn't need to be my explanation. I've pitched an explanation there, but that's one that kind of makes sense to my head. But whatever the writers wanted to come up with, something was needed.
I also feel if look, it's not necessarily, look, we've praised the the evolution of the world, the Industrial Revolution and all of that stuff, and I stand by that. But I absolutely get that if you're someone that doesn't necessarily want your world of Avatar to be, the modern world, I absolutely get that. Let's be honest. There's a moment in this episode where you're going, "Oh, planes." Like, what's next, people? Are we? Do you know what I mean? Like, we're really doing the full gambit of, I look forward to the underground and subway networks and like iPhones. I can understand how, because even I was a little bit like, okay, we're doing planes as well, cool. And I know we've kind of done planes before.
I quite like the planes, actually. I have an interesting, like, I find that interesting. I think like the essential implication with the planes is that war sometimes has an adverse effect of pushing certain technologies, and I think the original Avatar did that. It was this quaint sort of agricultural world, and yet the Fire Nation had zeppelins and tanks. Yeah. So for me,
it's so funny, isn't it?
Go on.
Sorry, go on. There you go. I don't know. I'll make my point.
Yeah. So I didn't have much to add to that. I just say, so for me, like, planes doesn't seem like that big a jump, especially in a world where cars exist. Like, what's the actual real world, our world, difference between a car being invented and a plane being invented? I'll look that up while you talk.
I just think it's funny because, and I'm on your side overall. I'm on your side of this argument, but it's funny because the line that best demonstrates that point for your argument is when Bolin says, "Oh man, can Thingamajig stop inventing bad war machines," or something like that. I have to get the exact line of dialogue of, but that sort of joke. And even though I'm on your side of the argument, that line I didn't. You've taken a really kind of interesting thematic interpretation of that line. Mm-hmm. I took that line as the writers themselves knowing they were chucking a lot of like transport and modern technology at this, and I took that line as sort of that slightly bad writing approach of, oh well, we'll just acknowledge it for anyone thinking it. We'll just acknowledge it.
I wrote that line down actually. It's so funny. I didn't do many notes this week, but one of the things I wrote down was, where does Hiroshi find the time to keep inventing evil machines?
Exactly. So it's two very different, and it represents the two. We've talked about how this show, kind of has two sides to it with its audience occasionally, and they sort of butt heads, and this is, I think it's important to say that, even though we fall on one side, I think when we can understand or it's recognised, and I absolutely, in that moment with that dialogue especially, went, well, that's just Bolin acknowledging the problem, but it's so funny how, you've taken maybe not from that line, but that line could represent what you're saying, which is a really interesting theme to explore. And it's just so funny how I think that that both interpretations of that line, both reactions to that line, are really valid.
I think as well, like I do think as well, like the show is leaning a little bit on your understanding of Avatar The Last Airbender there as well, because I think one of the things that came up in Last Airbender as a show was, about how war can push technology and push almost innovation, because the Fire Nation had used their vast resources to create weapons and tools that no other nation had. The drill. Think of the drill. That giant drill. The mechanical on big... big tracks, giant thing that was going to burst through the walls of Ba Sing Se. That's such an insane thing to exist. It's so huge. Where and how did they manage to manufacture something that large? Who knows? But the implication I think in the original show was always about war pushing innovation in a weird way. So I think I'm also applying the previous show to this show, because this show isn't being as explicit about it, I don't think. And I think part of why is because, this war has been a secret war in many ways until now. It's an open war now, but all season it's been bubbling under the surface, right? Peacefully, but not peacefully, if that makes sense. It seemed like one madman and a group of followers, and actually it's been this whole organization that's been moving around underneath, and Hiroshi Sato at the sort of partly at the center of it, Asami's dad, sort of using his sort of position as a sort of Henry Ford figure, having actually used the technology to help push Amon into a place where Amon had all the advantages, the same way that, but secretly rather than openly during a major war. And that's, I think, where maybe the message is a little harder to translate, because I think this hasn't been an open war for a very long time. But the idea they were that prepared for it is really fascinating. Like Amon knew that at some point, if they take the city, the United Republic Guard, or whatever they called the big fleet that came in with General Iroh, he knew they were going to come eventually and was ready and had planned for that. And that's it's good, because it makes Amon seem like a master planner. And Korra does actually, I think someone has a line that's like, he always seems several steps ahead of us. I think it's Korra says that to General Iroh, like once they've gotten out of the boat situation. And I remember just thinking, like, yeah, he really has. Like, he knew exactly how the response would be. He knew they would just fucking, a fleet of boats would just march up the river and hit Republic City, launch through the ocean, whatever, and come to Republic City, and he was ready for it, both with the bombs and the planes. But yeah, I agree. There's definitely other ways you can interpret that, and I think it is really fascinating that this show on its own maybe hasn't done enough to make that theme clear. Whereas
and that fight. Yeah, go on, sorry.
No, I can't remember where it was going. It was one of those sentences that I was like, even I wasn't sure where it was going. Whereas now it's, I don't know. You
were saying it, hoping I would interrupt or at least like take the next point after the sentence. That fight scene, because it's funny because you say about the action not being that good. It's interesting because I think with that fight scene, like there's some epic stuff in it, and there's very specifically some epic Korra water bending stuff. There's some epic General Iroh fighting, like when he's kind of like fire bending from his legs and like shooting away bombs and stuff, and when she's redirecting the bombs with water underwater and like almost creating like a tornado effect with the water. I think there's some really epic stuff in that, but I'm gonna say it. I think that fight scene's too long. That scene is too long. I think it just goes on a bit too long. There's just like, okay, yeah, we got some more bombs coming, and we're gonna have to fight against them. Like, all right, cool. Like, it's good stuff, but I just think it's a little. I hate saying it because obviously the animation's beautiful and there's some really great stuff in it, but I think that's a little laborious. I think it's just a little bit like, yeah, okay, like,
well,
all right.
So I think it's laborious because it's not great action. I think it looks good, because I always think this is an interesting point people sometimes get muddled on, and I've definitely done it too. But like, I think I'm more aware of it recently, having reviewed the original Avatar movie, as in the Blue Cat movie, the James Cameron one, recently for Rewind Reviews. I think often people confuse good-looking action with good action. I think, you look at a movie like Die Hard, right? And you go, like, that is an ugly movie in many ways. Like, on purpose, like, by design, right? But the action, it's not about these cool hero shots, these top-tier visuals. But the action, it's all about stakes and situational awareness and, like, how they're going to get out of this, right? It's about survival, right? So for me, when I say good action, I'm talking about, like, was I invested in the action in the moment, is what I'm really coming down to. Because were the action sequences at the start of this episode visually appealing? Yeah, absolutely. There was some cool shit in there. But cool shit needs to be combined with me being invested in the action. Because if I'm not invested in the action, then even a short action scene will feel laborious. That's my sort of stance. And this is what we talked about when we talked about the original. It's very confusing that I'm referencing the other thing called Avatar here, so I am sorry to those who are, like, struggling to keep track of what I'm talking, because even I'm struggling. But Avatar the Blue Cat movie, I'll just call it the Blue Cat movie. So the Blue Cat movie has this big, epic sequence of war at the end of the movie, and there's two sections to it. There's a big up-in-the-air battle, and then there's a smaller scale Jake Sully's life battle. And we talked in our review about how I much preferred the smaller scale Jake Sully's life battle, which wasn't as visually interesting as the big epic sky battle, but I was more invested in the stakes of that. I understood what the goals of that fight were. In this, it's just like, what we're doing here is just demonstrating Warbad, this fleet getting absolutely annihilated by superior technology. And the actual fight itself almost feels superfluous, because you're going, well, they've won. That's the whole point, is they've come in with these planes. The point of this fight is always going to be they've won. So it's just a question of getting General Iroh out. Do we really need to spend 5 minutes doing that?
But it's also like we know where this, it's not even like, it's not a big final battle. It's not it's an introductory. We're coming, and you, as an audience member, you go, everyone, you're like, well, we're not going to waste. General Iroh's not going to die before he's even spoken to Korra, is he? So I think, you also structurally, the conclusion, so maybe that makes it, that gives it less stake as well. Yeah.
So yeah, I do have I have strong feelings on this whole idea, because we've been thinking about it a lot lately. But I think there is a mix up sometimes between, like, good action and good visuals, and I think
that's a good shout. No.
So very quickly, because people are probably screaming because I said I was going to look it up and I didn't say. The car invented in 1886, Chris, and then 1903 for the plane. So there were only, 17 years between the two?
Okay, well, there you go.
Interesting. That's very interesting. I don't know if that that just for the real world equivalent, I thought that was interesting to look at, to see if it is that.
No, I don't think it's
from
I think it's a similar. Yeah, it makes sense. Like I say, I don't find that stuff with this show a problem. I think it adds an interesting aesthetic and look to it and feel to it, and makes it feel like a true evolution of the first show. Like, this was the first moment of, oh no, I get it. Like, if this is your view, I understand. I could feel. Do you know what I mean? Like I say, I was almost a little bit like, okay, planes, yep, cool.
Yep. And again, it's interesting to look at. I think it is beautifully animated, and it's good. There's some really cool angles, and some cool stuff happens inside of the fight. But yeah. Sorry, my brain just died on me because we were talking about we'd gone back to the plane stuff. So I was because I jumped in with the 1 point. Ignore me. I'm losing my mind, everyone.
Okay.
Quickly to get us back on track. But what do we think then of the use? Go on.
Yeah, thank you. Go.
I was just going to say, what did you think of the use of General Iroh? Who I think maybe last week I called him Zuko's son, but actually, that can't be right either. He'd have to be grandson at this point, right? 70 years on.
Yeah, he references his grandfather. So
yeah. So I think even
which,
I got that wrong last week. So
I'd have liked it, and obviously they probably wouldn't have known each other, which is sad. But I'd have almost liked Because, I don't know about you, but when he said my grandfather would respect the Avatar's views, I'm thinking, sounds more like your great uncle than it does your grandfather, but all right.
Well, that's an interesting thought, but do you not think it's possible that Zuko grew up to be a wise old man like his grandfather?
Yeah, he'd have only known evolved post-show Zuko. Yeah, that's fair.
No.
I really, it's, again, difficult because it's like they wanted to have him, but didn't really, once that fight was done, didn't really have anything for him to do. We'll see next week. And I liked the whole bringing in the fact that, like, we're getting the other brother as well. But I was almost like, I'm not sure we've even spent enough...
brother, Boomy.
Yeah, I was kind of like, I'm not sure we spent enough time with Genro Iroh before we're then introducing like another character to get excited about. Yes. I think that, to be honest with you, I feel I'll be able to judge that more next week because obviously he's leading the B team, isn't he? So how that plays out will almost be a better judgment of the use of his character.
Yeah. So for those who don't remember, they set up the sort of goals of the characters. Korra and Mako have gone off to directly confront Amon, while the B team, as Chris just phrased it, which is Asami, General Iroh, Bolin, Pabu, and a homeless guy. They the homeless guy from episode 1, actually, specifically. Did he go with them or did he just stay behind? I think he might have stayed behind. Actually,
no, I think he stayed behind, didn't he? But I don't know.
Yeah,
for sure.
he might have done. But anyway, they're off to take out the planes from the airfield. They have worked out they're probably stored at, which I guess they wouldn't have known it was called an airfield. The space in which Asami knows her dad could potentially have kept those vehicles at. They're going to go destroy them so that when reinforcements arrive in the form of is it General Boomy, Commander Boomy, who's bringing in his warship. So we now know what it is, what it is that Tenzin's brother is doing with his life. We've yet to look at it's Kaya, I think, the sister, but we're at least getting some Boomy next week. Well, seemingly. From this setup. So he's coming in and they're going to clear the way for that force to get through and not be ambushed the way Iroh's were. So that's kind of the chess pieces moving into place for next week. So yeah, I agree. I think it is really important to see how the character is then implemented into that story before we judge. I like the character though. I don't mind that it's got the same voice. I think some people might find that confusing, but come on, if you've got Dante Basco, I think this is like acceptable, right? That his grandson sounds like him.
It's okay. Acceptable, but it was distracting. Like as someone watching it for the first time, not used to that, it was. I did find myself going, same voice, Zuko's voice quite a bit. Yeah, there's like a weird nostalgia, but not nostalgia. It's kind of akin to, I think my cousin hit the nail. I think I've said this before. My cousin hit the nail on the head with a huge problem of the live action Lion King that I don't think enough people talked about, which is because you've got James Earl Jones back, there's this weird sense of when you hear his lines, and it's the same script and the same actor, but you've got another actor saying the lines back and it's not the animation, you inherently feel something is off with that movie because your brain can't quite compute how some elements are the same and some elements are different, and it makes the whole thing feel off. Whereas, like, if they'd have gone, right, okay, let's not bring him back, let's have a completely different actor or a completely different script, maybe or in that specific case, you wouldn't find that so much. And I think, like, I'll get used to it and it'll be fine and I'll be at the place you're at. But as someone watching it for the first time, it is odd. My brain is having to adjust to it.
Yeah, I think there is a disconnect there, I guess. Like, I'm sort of like, I think of it as like, when they do that thing, like, I'm trying to think of like a clean example. Do you remember in Doctor Who, where they brought in Torchwood? Oh, we've done Harry Potter and Doctor Who this week. Great, good work, to both of us. Do you remember when they had the actress that plays Gwen in Torchwood? She'd already been in the show, so they were just like, she's like a relative, she's like an ancestor, she's like direct descendant. It just feels like that to me. Like, direct descendants
but
that looks and sounds like the old one. I've kind of, because we've had enough of that in television where they've wanted to use the same actors. You know, in a world where Back to the Future just makes the same actors play their descendants and stuff, I was just like, fine.
Yeah, and I haven't got a problem with it. I'm saying it's going to take more than one episode in experiencing it once for my brain to get to compute it. And you know, I agree. It's a common trope. I think the Doctor Who example is a bit like, you know, she played a secondary character in one episode. Like it's not the same as Zuko.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. That's why I was like, I prefixed it with looking for a clean example because I was struggling to find one, but I knew what I meant. Very quickly, so I think we're right. That's still to be decided. The voice thing, obviously, I accept that's going to be a distraction for some people. So let's very briefly let's put your coat on, Chris. It's cold out today. Below zero overnight, I think they said. So we're going to head over to Nitpick Corner. And the reason this is in
could I just say, Dan? I mean, you know, it's put a bit of context on that. It's fucking cold outside, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's really cold. Like, it's colder than I've when I woke up this morning, like, I genuinely had the thought, and I woke up at 7 a.m., podcast at 8 a.m. I genuinely thought I'm not going to make it to the podcast. Because the room that the microphone is in is the next room over, and I wasn't sure I could survive getting out from under the covers in my bed to where my clothes were.
Yeah.
To without turning into a dancicle.
And hopefully it's not being picked up on the bike. I've closed all the doors, so it shouldn't be. But like our boiler is like making the noise our boiler makes. Because it's a combi. The noise our boiler makes after we've run hot water. You know, there's like 30 seconds of noise after that. It's making that noise.
Depending on what kind of boiler you've got, but yeah.
Yeah, it's making that noise constantly at the moment. And last time it was really cold outside, it did this and sort of fixed itself. But I'm like, how hard's that motherfucker working right now?
Yeah, so thankfully we've got electric radiators in our place, which are thankfully silent. But the one right behind me is it's inches away from my back, and it's full blast, and I'm still cold.
Are they good though? Any place I've lived in with an electric,
I could see my own breath in my bedroom. That is not acceptable.
And that I find that, in my experience at least, is the problem with electric radiators. Like, you're right in front of it, you're probably hot, but they don't heat the room as such. The fact that
they aren't as effective at heating the space. That's very true. But while we're we're getting on our coats and we're heading out, which is a brave thing to do with this temperature. Unless through some miracle my house is colder than the outside, which I suspect is probably not true, which means if it's fucking cold inside, it's fucking cold outside. But we're braving it, Chris, to go to Nitpick Corner. And the reason this is in Nitpick Corner, Chris, is because I'm not sure if this is a problem or not. But I think it might be. Tarlok looks like his dad a bit, yes?
Yeah.
His dad got facial reconstructive surgery. Why does he look like his dad following the surgery?
No, I think that is a problem.
Does facial reconstructive surgery in the world of Avatar also change your genes? That's my question, Chris. Your DNA.
Brilliant. Yeah, you're right. That's really funny.
I was watching it, and like Nadia was like, "What's wrong?" Because I had a real scrunched up face. Because I was like, "What's happening here?" And I'd never noticed it before. But it really struck me because I got really hung up on the facial reconstructive surgery existing in this world. That was actually my technology. How did that exist? Because that doesn't even exist now. He had facial reconstructive surgery back when Aang was still about.
Yeah, I also don't necessarily... I don't think it's necessary either, really, particularly. Do you know what I mean? Like,
no, he went off... Yeah, he was a villain in Republic City. He's gone off to some remote water tribe.
Yeah.
Like, encampment. It's no one would Oh, you that guy from a police? No one's gonna know that. Say that.
No one's
Very
putting
strange.
those pieces together. Because also, am I right in how did he escape? Because surely he went to prison, or did he just take his? Did they just take his bending away and went, well, fuck it?
Yeah, I guess that's a really good point. I guess they just took his bending away and then let him go.
Because if they did that, he doesn't fucking need facial reconstruction surgery, does he? He just needs to piss off to the water tribe.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that. Yeah, you're correct. Man, Nitpick Corner's turned out to be a weird one this week. We've opened a can of worms all around Yakon's backstory. Sorry, Yakon's backstory.
I don't know if the surgery, yet he looks like him thing is even a nitpick. I think that's a full-on, like, valid criticism.
Did you enjoy that he made bending illegal, and then he put that Amon made bending illegal and put a big put his face on the Aang statue? I thought that was kind of fun. That's like a goofy, that's like a Power Rangers villain move, and I really loved it. It's totally a bit disparate with the rest of the episode because it's so silly, but I kind of loved it.
Yeah, he really does look like Tarlok. I've just rewatched the scene to see if it starts with like him escaping, which it doesn't. Yeah, I like that, and I like the line of benders getting their powers taken away was haunting. I thought that was very
wasn't
effective.
It? And actually, on the subject
Dan.
Go on, sorry.
Yeah, we might be about to say the same thing because I think there's a big subject that we've not talked about.
I think this is yet another example of the horror of bloodbending. Like this episode, having showing the animals being bloodbended was really upsetting. Using the kids' reaction to that to really re-emphasize that, but also I think making them do it on each other. That and having a person describe so vividly what it felt like to be bloodbended on was pretty brutal. I don't know if that is what you were going to talk about, but yeah, very upsetting.
No, well, my thing is linked to that. Obviously, there is a big reveal in this episode as well as like the brother thing. Obviously, there is a big reveal in that. Amon is doing it. He's taking away their powers through bloodbending.
Right? Yeah, I have questions about
what
this.
Aang did.
Yes, it makes sense that would be a power only the Avatar could wield. Energy bending, if it is a different form of bending, almost like a fourth form of bending. A fifth form of bending. That's his version of a sixth sense, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, it makes sense that they figured it out through a different means, but like an extension of water bending through blood bending, leading to the ability to remove someone's bending is fascinating. Does it make sense? I don't know. It's a magical world where people can manipulate the elements with their minds, I guess. So and movements. So yes, I don't know. How did you feel about
that? Weirdly, I didn't actually think about it as from a logistical point of view because you're right. Actually, I think I probably would like to know more about that. My thought was more from like a story point of view. I was pleased that they didn't undo because there was a term. What was the term for what Aang did? There was a term.
Energy bending.
And did you reveal? Energy bending, that's it. I was really pleased it wasn't energy bending. I'm pleased that they stuck to that being, an Avatar, Deus Ex Turtle exclusive. Whilst I use that flippant term.
Well, Aang pre-ordered the game, so he got lots of DLC benefits. He got the bonuses, he got the extras from the turtle. Whereas Yakone he's on Reddit and he knows you don't pre-order video games. So he didn't get that. So he had to grind up his ability to take people's powers manually in the game. He didn't just day one put in a code and get all the coolest shit. It's
a weird really analogy. Checked whether we got because that was a big hang up of mine. I never really checked the comments or anything as to see whether other people were like, "Oh no, it's fine. Chris is overreacting to the
with the turtle." I don't know. Yeah. It's been a while since that went out, so there probably were comments at the time. I've not been back and looked. But yeah, I will at some point. But anyway, yeah, carry on. My weird video game analogy.
My thing was more that I was really pleased it wasn't that. I was pleased that that's sort of an Avatar exclusive thing. And I was kind of like, because the horrifying thing about that, all those people getting their bending taken away, is it's a really cool visual. But you've also got to do this thing where you kind of go, it's a bit like, take another shot, it's a bit like Flux and Doctor Who, where you're like, okay, but if every planet's getting destroyed, you've either got to reverse it, or are we just in a world with a shitload less planets and galaxies and all this sort of stuff? And I was kind of like, how does this world, like, if you're going to do that, you either need to reverse it, or we need to maybe explore, you know, the pain and the suffering of all the people that, you know, had their bending away. Like, I will say, the latest phase of Marvel movies has been very inconsistent and up and down. But I thought the other day, I'll give them fucking credit for the amount of angles they've taken on the blip and the way they've actually kind of explored that in a number of different ways. That wasn't just forgotten about, like, you know, what Thanos did. And I kind of... What kind of appealed to me about it being bloodbending was I was like, well, you know, I don't know if I'm planting a flag in this prediction, but I'm looking at it going, we've got a bad guy who's able to bloodbend, and we've got someone we're seemingly trying to redeem with bloodbending. You know, it's the opposite scene when all those people are queuing up and Talok is reversing it. There was a suggestion... The reason I liked that it was bloodbending is I was like, oh, maybe it can be reversed then, basically. Maybe Lynn can get her powers back somehow. You know, if not through someone else bloodbending them back, but if anything, through energy bending. Maybe, you know, if bloodbending's done it to them, energy bending can bring them back, and therefore if Korra learns that, it can bring it back. Or Talok can learn to reverse it, and he could actually be a genuinely good politician, and his redemption can be, you know, him giving the Republic City back that power. That's what excited me. The fact that it was like, oh, okay, by it being bloodbending, there are narrative options to take us back to, you know, a better place.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think you're right. It is a really interesting. Aside from the practical of, does it make sense that
how's that working logistically?
There's another extension of waterbending. How does that physically work? Just taking that aside, it does all of the stuff you just said. Like, it is a really interesting approach, and it does sort of give you a flicker of hope for maybe a solution. Or if it doesn't, then you hope for actually exploring the aftermath of that, dealing with the victims, and exploring that as a storyline, because that could potentially be its own thing. And the show has proven itself, you know, willing to, you know, explore the aftermath of its choices. You know, I mean, even the existence of Republic City is the aftermath of Aang's story. You know, Republic City is in such an interesting place, and it's because of a war that we saw. These are the Republic City people are almost the victims of the Fire Nation and the Earth Kingdom's war. You know, that's you know, these are those colonies that then got like sort of like left in limbo. And I don't know. It's I wouldn't be surprised by either option, but I think they're both interesting. Did we on that subject of the reveal that he can, you know, that he's a waterbender, and not only a waterbender but a bloodbender, and not only a bloodbender but a person who can use that bloodbending somehow to take your powers away. Did you enjoy the hypocrisy of that? Because that's my favorite element to that. I just love the idea that a guy that hates bending is actually a bender. I think that is my sort of favorite element of it, because I just think that works. There's just a delicious irony to that, because that's always been the thing in history, isn't it? You know, it's like, you know, Hitler going on about the true Aryan, blonde, blue-eyed, you know, people when he was himself not that. You know, there's just something always really weirdly ironic about that, that I enjoy. When a villain,
yeah,
is
it's one of the best things about, you know, it's one of the best things about Voldemort, isn't it?
Right, yeah, exactly, yeah, 100%. You know, he's that hypocrisy. That hypocrisy just makes a villain that much more like anger-inducing. Like, because you just like you.
I feel like,
yeah,
it especially given our ongoing, you know, take a shot Harry Potter thing. I feel like, you know, I feel like Voldemort was right there for you instead of getting quite real with with your Hitler chat there.
Well, you know, Chris, sometimes you don't want to reference Harry Potter.
Did you? Where was the Harry Potter reference earlier? Because earlier you were like, "Oh, we've done Doctor Who and Harry Potter this week." But
we did Harry Potter right up top, like almost immediately, and I made a mental note that we'd done it. I can't remember what it was now, but we did a really early one this week, really early one.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I can't quite remember what it was now, but I just remember that we did it. It was like an hour ago, so. You know, I can't be expected to remember what we said 10 minutes ago, Chris, let alone an hour ago. And considering we said we didn't have much to say on this episode, I think we've had a lot to say on this episode, Chris.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, I kind of, I realised, I was like, well, I've got at least two big things, and then the bloodbending thing as well. I was like, oh, maybe actually there's three discussions there. Have you got, I don't know, that's me done, Dan. I don't have any other notes. You got other notes?
I just liked that the homeless guy was back, but I think we've already covered him. Oh, Nadia watched this one with me, and she saw the line, and instead of feeling like horrified that he just created a factory of people taking people's bending away, she was like, "Oh, he's got a job." I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, 4 whole nations. He's gonna be there for a while, isn't he? And that's that's a really good point. It's very impractical what he's up to. It's gonna take him a long time to get to everyone, isn't it?
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
He's gonna be a busy man. Okay, I wrote this down. Commander Boomy, described as a bit of a madman, but he's a leader in the United Forces. And I put a question mark next to United Forces. Whose forces are these United Forces? Are they an army built of people from all nations? A bit like Republic City is a city that welcomes all nations? Not sure. Don't know. Makes sense.
You're right.
There'd be a sort of world army, to stop shit like what's happen. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. I think that's it though in terms of my notes.
Well, in that case, Dan, let's triv it up.
I'm gonna give you some trivia. I went for it this week. I went for an interesting delivery.
I tried. It was sort of seductive.
Was it? I was going for a bit dramatic, but I like that you found it sort of seductive.
Maybe that says something about my taste when it comes to you seducing.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. Anyway, it's trivia time, guys. It's time for the trivia. So, skeletons in the closet is a colloquial phrase used to describe a shameful secret. In this case, it references Amon being Tarlok's brother, and how Amon is really a bender named Noatak. Yeah, I got that. Thanks, trivia. Originally, after being captured by Amon, Tarlok was going to be... Oh, yeah, this is really interesting. I thought this was a really good piece of trivia. So originally, the plan was for, in this episode, for them to try and go find Amon, and they find his cabin, and that's the cabin where Tarlok is being imprisoned, and where this conversation was going to happen. And Korra was going to be captured in her episode, not there, but somewhere in Republic City. Somewhere, Tarlok's inside the city itself. They swapped the two locations around so that this conversation happened in Republic City, in this case in Temple Island, and Korra got dragged out into the mountains, during her episode. And I think that actually makes a lot more sense of how she got back so quickly, because the original plan was that she hadn't left the city.
Yeah, that does make sense. Yeah, when you hear that, it's like, oh, okay, yeah.
I see how you ended up doing that. But I think it's really interesting that they did that. I don't know why they changed those two locations around. I don't think it makes too much difference, but interesting nonetheless. It certainly explains my weird, she was out in the mountains. How far away is that? She got back real quick. Yeah, makes that make a lot more sense. The more ambient, somber sections of the war theme that played during the initial stages of battle between the United Forces and the Equalists was something Brian Kinitsko, pushed for against network objections. He wanted to reinforce the reality of war. Clearly, the network were a bit afraid of doing that in what is ostensibly a kids' show. I think the ambition of what they were going for in this series being a bit more adult, growing up with its audience, was more than Nickelodeon were willing to take. This show aimed more at teenagers and young adults than the original show, airing on Nickelodeon, a channel that hadn't otherwise grown up with its audience. I think there was a disconnect there, and we'll come back more to that as the seasons go on, because the show got mistreated as it went on, to the point where it was eventually taken off the air and online only. That happened in its third or fourth season.
Blimey.
Yep. Yeah. The last season went out digitally. Didn't air on television.
Jesus, this is Avatar.
Yep. Nickelodeon really got cold feet about the themes of the show, and the age bracket the show was aiming at. I know why they did it.
You go. Sorry, you go.
Well, I was just going to say I know why they did it, and I think they made the right choice, but I also understand why Nickelodeon got cold feet that it might not be for them.
Yeah, and I think in this instance, though, I get it, but I think Bri is right to do it, and yes. I think, the audience could take some fucking dramatic music. Jeez.
Right, yeah. I mean, it is quite a somber tone theme that goes through a lot of this episode, and I get it. I do get it. But there you go. During the course of the Harry Potter movies, Daniel Radcliffe went through 160 pairs of glasses. Isn't that interesting trivia, Chris, that you really enjoy and is relevant?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The before theme that plays throughout Tarlok's flashbacks and narration is a duet comprised of two instruments, a cello and an erhu. Erhui? I'm not sure how to pronounce this, but that is a Chinese instrument. It looks a little bit like a violin, but it's two-stringed. It's a cool instrument. I googled it following seeing this, and I'd never seen it before. It's a really interesting looking thing, and it makes some incredible sounds. So yeah, each instrument in this case represented a character. So the cello represented Noatok, and the erhu, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, I hope I am, representing Tarlok. So those two instruments were used primarily during scenes that had emotional moments or big moments for each of those characters.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, I like when they use the music to, like, they give it. I like it when shows have like certain themes or certain instruments that they tie more thematically to certain characters. So the soundscape always sort of like fits when certain characters are being the focus of the show. I think they did that in Steven Universe, where certain instruments sort of represented certain characters, and the songs that would for those characters would be heavier on those instruments, or use those instruments more clearly and more like at the front. I think that's fun.
Yeah, that's awesome.
The depiction of animal cruelty where Noatok and Tarlok test their bloodbending on animals was something that the creators did not want to depict in a superfluous or glorifying manner. They tried to balance it out by showing Tarlok's empathy for the animals and his disgust and regret that he feels after being bloodbent by his brother for the first time. They've clearly said that in some sort of interview since. Yeah, that makes sense. I think that works.
Yeah, that tracks.
Yeah, that's the last of the trivia. We don't have any Sotomobile trivia this week. So no Sotomobiles exist. The airplanes, I tried to find if they had a specific design element. They're just like old biplanes. There's nothing specific. They're not based on a certain kind of like old bomber or anything like that.
Yeah, it's like they turned to the animators and went, right, what do you think of when you think of planes at war? Draw that.
Right. It's like a sort of like a very, it's kind of feels like an iconic sort of like drawing of a thing, like, you know, like how in cartoons there are certain objects that always look the same, like bones are always drawn in that exact same way, you know, they're sort of the white perfect middle shaft and then the two sort of like heart shapes on either end, but you know, that's one very specific kind of bone, and there are actually lots of different shapes and sizes of bone, but you'll never see a different shape and size of bone in a cartoon, because that's just not what you do. Like, this feels like the equivalent with planes, where it's like, this is just like sort of typical first image that pops into your head of plane at war. Yeah. So yeah, they're pretty cool, but yeah, they don't appear to have been based on anything specific. So yeah, that's everything. Wow. How long did we actually go for? Wow. As normal, basically. That was a normal episode length.
Yeah. Yeah.
After all of our talk that we didn't have much to say, we found plenty
to
say.
That was the you know, the minute we were like, we don't have much to say, it was going it was going normal length, wasn't it?
Yeah, that seemed inevitable, didn't it? Well, as always, there's a few places you can get us. If you have any thoughts on the episode or on anything we just said, you're welcome to get in touch with us through email, mail@nothingbutstatic.co.uk. Or, of course, you can head over to youtube.com/nothingbutstaticuk and leave a comment on the video version of this exact podcast. And I say video version when you can't see our faces. It's just I've just put up like a loose visual alongside the audio file you're currently listening to if you're hearing this through Spotify or iTunes. If you're listening to this on YouTube, well, you're already there. Go down, put a comment, give us a like, give us a subscribe, smash that bell, whatever that means. I don't actually know what that means.
Smash it. I don't know. Yeah, no.
But smash the bell. It's a good thing, I'm told, by every other YouTuber. Also, while you're here, Raid Shadow Legends is... no, I'm kidding. Casper Mattresses, MeUndies. Let's start just naming all the sponsors and see if we can get one. Yeah, so you can go give us a comment and that helps us. Yeah. Oh dear. God damn. Why did none of these people sponsor us, Chris? They seem to sponsor everyone. Like I've got in my head, I imagine that you call what's the food one that brings you fresh food every day? What did you just name it?
What, Hello Fresh?
Yeah, Hello Fresh. Is that the one that you get food
or Blue Chew, man? Blue Chew are sponsoring everyone.
Well, this is what's weird. Like, I imagine if you call their customer services, they just go like, welcome to HelloFresh. Can we sponsor your YouTube video? Like, that's just how it starts. Like, that's because it seems like there's no one that isn't being sponsored by one of these companies. And I just keep thinking, Raid Shadow Legends for me, if you watch gaming content. And I just think, like, where's our fucking sponsorship? These people seem to be giving out sponsorships like sweets. Where's ours?
The phone line thing's amazing. Just like, hello, Blue Chew, would you like an erection or a sponsorship deal? Press 1 for erection, 2 for sponsorship.
I would have laughed harder at that, but I was literally sipping my drink as you said that, so I'm sorry. That did not get the laugh it deserved as a sentence, Chris, so I want you to know. Anyway. So yeah, so you can...
If you're not Dan... Dan. Yes. No, wait, let me do it, Dan, because I've got a seamless... I know you're probably going to say something else, but I'm taking us there. Dan, if you're not into home food deliveries or erections, but you are into high-quality fan art...
Yeah?
Have I got the channel for you? Have I got the pages for you, Dan?
You absolutely have, because you're
Raphodraws.
about to tell the good people all about Raphodraws, who drew the art that is the key art for this podcast. So it's that Appa at sunset. Now, Rapho does all sorts of art from different fandoms. There's some Avatar stuff, but there's a bunch of other stuff on there, and it all looks great. And you can get it on Rapho's like Redbubble account, where you can get it on T-shirts and mugs and phone cases and all that stuff. And there's so much cool stuff. Go support Rapho. There's a few places you can go for that. Obviously, if you want to just see some of Rapho's art, you can head over to Instagram.com/Raphodraws. It's spelt RAPHODRAWS. Or you can go to their launch links, launchlinks.io/u/Raphodraws, to get access to all of their it's a page full of links to all their other places that you can see their work. So yeah, do that. Because why wouldn't you do that?
Do it. It's great stuff. It's great stuff.
Yeah, you can support us in a few different ways. Of course, you can head over to the Patreon. If you're not currently subscribed to our Patreon, it's as little as $1 a month, and you get episodes of this podcast and our other podcast Rewind reviews 1 week ahead of their normal release, plus bonus material occasionally, including, and I guess we can say what this is now, we're going to be, if we haven't already, releasing... a small sort of 15 to 30 minute podcast, although the first episode we've already recorded ended up being 40, but we did a lot of setup, we did a lot of preamble. Chris told the whole story about his childhood and embarrassing himself, which I've repeated since to Nadia, and she cringed for about 5 minutes. So if you want to hear that story...
Tale.
What's that, sorry?
I just said, yeah, it's quite an embarrassing tale.
Yeah, it's great. It's good stuff. That'll be on the Patreon as well, exclusive to our patrons. But we take an old song, and we just go through the lyrics and make fun of it. The first episode, we look at Limp Bizkit's Break Stuff and discover what a whiny little child Fred Durst was. And also that he's mildly schizophrenic and has an argument about himself about whether he understands what a chainsaw is. So it's great. It's great. You should check it out. So that might already be up by the time you hear this, because we've gotten a bit ahead of ourselves recording these Korras. But if it isn't, it's coming soon. So yeah, head over to the Patreon. Little as $1 a month, you get access to that. You can support us in a few other ways, of course. You can tell a friend. That also helps. You can like and subscribe on YouTube, or you review it on the podcast platform you're using. So if you're listening to this on Spotify, you can review. iTunes has a proper review system with stars, or you can then write a review. And that, again, doing that on whatever platform you use, because all these platforms have review systems, it tells that platform you enjoyed it, and it's more likely then for the algorithm to share it with others, so you can help us that way. Or, of course, you can continue to listen. Just doing that is in itself a massive thing, and we're really, really grateful for anyone who's continuing to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially in the wake of what I consider, from our perspective as podcasters, Chris, this to have been a very inconsistent series of Korra, of Avatar, Analysing Avatar. I have been all over the place. I've been sick, and I've been rambly in ways that I've never been before, and I'm concerned about the comments for these episodes. None of them have released yet at the point of us recording this. We're in late January, and I am, well, mid-January actually, but I'm very worried about what happens.
I think you're overthinking. I think it's all right.
Yeah, but I mean, I live in that state. Overthinking it is my default position, so
Yeah. Nah,
that's the sitch. Anyway, thank you all for listening, though. We really appreciate you guys sticking with us. Obviously, only one more episode left, and then we're back to Rewind Reviews, where we'll be doing Rugrats. So stick around for that. The Rugrats movie, which is a bit Schrodinger's movie for Chris and I. That's going to be an exciting one, because we both watched it originally and loved it, but neither of us have really gone back to the Rugrats movie since, and therefore that might indicate maybe not so great, but we'll see. So yeah, that'll be a thing to keep your eye out for. So yeah, again, if you go to the Patreon, you can get these a week early.
I'm saying, I reckon it's going to hold up. I've got faith.
Yeah, I think so too. But we don't technically know that, because it does the fact that we haven't gone back to it does somewhat imply that maybe it's not as good as we remember, because otherwise wouldn't we have gone back to it sooner? But I'm with you, man. I have faith. I want it to be as good as I remember it is. So yeah, well, stick around, listeners, and we'll find out.
I just don't think there's as much nostalgic for it. Do you know what I mean? Like, some movies you go back to for nostalgia, not for, you're not like, oh, I'm sure the quality of that holds up, So yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Well, we will see. I'm trying not to get my hopes up too much, because I genuinely came out of the cinema having seen that was one of the best films I've ever seen. Like, I was so excited when I came out of the cinema from Rugrats the movie.
Yeah, I don't know if that's going to stand. I don't know if it's going to be one of the best films we've ever seen, but I think it's going to hold up.
This is what I'm saying, though, Chris. My memory, I came out so hyped from that film. I was so impressed with that film. I think I only ever saw it. I think I saw it again when it came out, like on VHS, like we rented it. But I don't think I ever owned that movie, and like it's not one I watched a bunch afterwards. And I'm again worried that means maybe it's not so good. So we'll see. We'll find out. Anyway, so yeah, that's everything for this week. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And we'll see you in a week's time when we sit down to review the final episode of Book 1, when we sit down to I've fucked this right up, but fine. Endgame. It's called Endgame. Bye, everyone.
Bye.